kill this code. Awesome. So that means the recording has already begun. I'm just going to magnify this terminal a little bit so that it's kind of more visible to you people on the other end. Yeah, I think that's more visible. I'm assuming it's visible, right? So I've curated very small application. It's made in Java, and it basically does nothing. It's just a simple normal website, right? I think I used this for some challenge, um, for as one of the challenges in the B-sides event. So you might learn a thing or two. All right. So the challenge is in I think idea projects, and then it's Evocop, and this is it. So just going to change the directory to where the build is. You don't have to know what the build is. Just know there is something called the build, and I'm going to run it. So right now we have an application running on port 8080, and how we see it, you just open the browser and then go to localhost and then 8080. Right, so our application looks like this. Okay, so we have sort of a login screen. It's saying the title is EvoCop. So if you've watched Mr. Robot, you have an idea of what EvoCop is. It's just a company that does bad things. And then, so this looks like what? A dev login screen. So it's where probably developers login, and it's asking for some what email that ends with a dev.com, a password field, and a login field. So maybe just thinking on the perspective of a threat actor, like I'm the bad guy, I want to compromise this application. I'll try making it do things that it's not basically supposed to do. Right, so I can come and try to click on login without entering anything, see how it will behave. Right, it tells me to fill this field. I can try just saying that ch and then try to log in. It's telling me I should include some what. So we have probably some rejects. Rejects is used in pattern matching, so it knows when we are entering an email that looks somehow. So I already in my head I already have a vector or something that I can use to exploit the application. Most versions of regex have some vulnerabilities. You just go and Google for something like maybe regex CVE, then you just read the information and comes back. So you can see we have some CVE extracting. I don't know what Python, all that stuff. You can just try it and see if it's really vulnerable to that. Right. So I'm assuming it's not vulnerable to that. So let's try something like that. Login, it's telling us to fill in the password field. So you can even try doing some SQL injections. I think I mentioned those in yesterday's session. So you can try entering some random stuff. See if it's going to log in, saying correct email or password. So you can also try brute force and see if you can be able to log in. But we know that this application is made in Java. How? Okay, so I have some extensions that give me an idea of what the application is made using. So we can see it's running on a Jetty. So Jetty, Jetty is a server. If we just come and Google for Jetty, and then server, we'll see what it's about. So just make use of Google. You can see Eclipse Jetty is a Java web server. So that basically means the application is made using Java. We already know the tech stack that has made the application, so we can have an idea of vulnerabilities in mind that we can use to compromise this application, right? So we know it's running on Java for one, and maybe we can try looking at the version. it's version 9 point something. So we can try Googling for any CV or any disclosed vulnerability affecting this version. If there isn't, we go to the next. We can see you're using Bootstrap 4.00. You just Google if there is any vulnerability affecting this Bootstrap. And then we have now Java and all these. You just try playing around with the application. If you don't know something, you just Google. Well, you essentially you're not supposed to know anything. You're just trying to break the application. And then we have things we call headers, all right? So as a normal user, when I just come to the page and refresh or do my own stuff, I can see the headers, right? But if I have an interception tool like Babsuit, it's called a proxy, right? So it intercepts the request from the server to the client-facing application, these, and then back. I'm not really going to use Babsuit. I'm just going to show you how else you can look for headers using something called CAL, right? So CAL is a terminal application that you can use to do many things. You can use it to download stuff from the internet. You can use it to see the source code of it's the HTML code of the site. So let's just have that in a practical way. So instead of using localhost, you can use 127.0.0.1. That basically means the same thing. It's just the same thing, all right? So using cal, we're just going to copy this and then get to the terminal. So this is the server running. Just to make things more isolated, I'm just going to minimize it and open another terminal, right? So this is let's assume the server is running, the application is running on a different server. So this is essentially a server, and now we have the hacker on this side. So this is the hacker, this is the server running the application. Just even going to minimize it so that you don't see whatever is happening, because when you are going to a website, you don't really see the server, you just see this, the web facing stuff. Right, so I'm going to use my normal fish that I love a lot, and then zoom in a little bit just to make it more visible, right? And then zoom in and make it a little bit bigger, all right, so that people don't strain a lot. Oh yeah, that's way big enough. And then Carl. So to use Carl, you can just say Carl and then minus H to see the options that you can feed to it. You can see you can give it data, F for fail, I don't know, all those remote and all that, blah, blah, blah. You can even go to Google and ask Google how to use Carl. It seems stupid, but it really works. How to use Carl, right? And then it gives you some stuff, you just read in. So what we want to see is the header. So you can just Google how to view headers using Carl. And that's how you learn. Those tiny small bits of information you gather when Googling, that's essentially how you learn. You learn new stuff and combine it to make something bigger. So because I know how to use Carl, I'm just going to say Carl and then give it the URL. So you can see we already have the HTML code of this application. We can see it's taking stuff. The title is evocop. It has some image called evocop.png. So I suppose this is the icon. It has some rows, some password fields, and all that stuff. This is the placeholder that we saw on the website. We have a form that takes in a password, and well, so when you're looking at these, the source code like this, it's basically the same way as when you just came here, right click right click the page, say inspect, and then view this stuff down here. It's basically the same thing, right? Only that now you're seeing it on in the terminal. So this is basically the app's HTML file. You can try to see if they have sometimes developers forget and embed maybe test passwords and all that. You can use that to compromise the application, right? And many other interesting things. So theoretically, we don't know how to break into this application. So what you're doing is essentially called black box penetration testing. You don't have the source code, you don't have anything, you just have a website and you want to get inside either by force or by I don't know what. All right, so I was talking about the headers. So Carl has an option to just build the headers alone. You can Google on how to do that, but I'm just going to do it. So you give it a capital I and then the URL. So that will just give you the headers, all right? So you can see HTTP, okay. I won't explain what that means, but it means the request was successful. And then it gives in the date and the content type, encoding chunk. This comes in handy when you have some other vulnerabilities. I can't recall the name, but it comes quite handy. I think it's something to do with website defacing, or I can't recall the name. And then we have the actual version of the Jetty server, which is quite handy. Maybe you can Google around to see if this version is vulnerable. So essentially, this application is vulnerable to the recently, I think this bug was found in 2020, 2021, the most famous Log4Shell vulnerability, right? So how we can exploit it? I'm just going to do it manually and then use an automation tool afterwards, because when I'm doing it manually, I'll be able to explain how it's done. So how you can find such an entrance, you can use the proxy tools that I was using. Right, so when you use Babsuit, you'll be able to see when somebody makes a request, what's being taken, and then what's getting back, and that's when you'll see that vulnerable header. So it's not here, it's the user agent header, right? And if you even if you Google for let's just do it, or maybe let's just assume we don't know what we're doing. We want to know if this application is vulnerable to anything. The first step is always enumeration, and what we are doing, or what we were doing, is enumeration, just trying to break in things, trying to learn how the application works, trying to see what it has, just thinking on how to break things, and then scanning to see the versions. That's all, that is reconnaissance and enumeration, right? You can even try directory brute forcing, or you try to open things like maybe slash admin, see if it gives back something or it does something fishy. You can even try doing maybe profile. So some applications have what we call broken authentication control. So maybe when you say profile, it will take you to someone else's profile, and that's how you just hack into someone's profile by just appending something. That's usually called broken authentication, broken something control, right? So I'm going to use a tool called Metasploit. It's used in penetration testing, and it's also used by evil or bad people to exploit things, right? I'm using terms like exploit and then I don't know, pen testing and all that. Well, essentially, you don't have to know what they are. If you really are interested, you can just Google and see what they are. So to launch Metasploit, it has some inbuilt capabilities like scanners that do scan anything for vulnerabilities. It can be a web application, it can be server running somewhere, it can be a Windows machine, a Linux machine, a phone, anything. It has all those tools built into it. And if you want to learn more about it, you can just go ahead and Google. Maybe you can just Google something stupid like Metasploit, or something else like how to use Metasploit, why is it used, where is it used, or all those things. You just Google, right? Then learn. Okay, so launching Metasploit, I'm just going to launch it using sudo privileges, and you launch it like that, MSF console. And then I'm going to enter the password. Mm, the password is quite lengthy, and it tells me that the version of Metasploit running is quite old. I should update it. I don't really need to update it, so let's just wait for it to do its thing, finish loading. So there are many other tools that you can use to scan. You can just go and Google web application vulnerability scanners. You have tools like Play. You have I don't know, just there's so many. You just click around the links and try to see the tools that you can use. We have Grabber, what it does, it grabs some stuff. We have Shodan, it analyzes the what. We have Vega, we have Z, Proxy, or APT, all those. You can just use all these to scan the application and then see if it has any form of vulnerability that you can now focus on. All right. So essentially, you begin by identifying the tech. So if the application is made using Java, you look for vulnerabilities related to Java. If the application is made using PHP, you look for vulnerabilities relating to PHP. If it's made using WordPress, you look for vulnerabilities that relate to uh, WordPress. So one of the things that you can maybe do is use something called search exploit. So that comes in back later. I'm not going to talk more on it. You can use exploit DB, right? So this is where people store exploits, right? So when they find a way to get into something, be it an application or something, they come and store the codes here that you can use to um, break into something. So I'm just going to Google to search for Java and maybe see anything that you can use to exploit a Java application, right? So you can see we have Mac OS, I don't know, JavaScript core, all those, and then you can use the filters to maybe limit it to only web applications. So let's say the platform, it's what? It's you don't have web, right? Let's try something else like maybe type web apps, and then be platform. Let's just leave it like that. So you can see the types of the many what exploit that you can use. You can even come and search for Jetty. We saw something like Jetty. All right. So not Jetty, it's Jetty. Jetty. Try to see if we have anything. All right. So you can see like we have 9.43. It has information disclosure vulnerability. So you can look into that and see how you can use it to just mess up the application, right? But you're not going to use that. So let me see. Oh, Metasploit has already finished. So I know the application has a vulnerability in it has a Log4Shell vulnerability. So let's assume you've already identified that. I'm just going to fast forward the steps because there's so many. So we assume you already know it's okay. You want to test if it's vulnerable to Log4Shell. You just come here and search for Log4, and then wait. Oh, there's a typo. Search for Log4. I'm just going to expand this because it looks weird. And then we can see the modules, exploitation modules found. So we have this is a what? It's an exploit. This is the first one. This is an exploit. This is a scanner. So it scans the what? It scans the application if it's vulnerable to log4 shell. So I think we'll have a session on the basics of Metasploit because it has so many things that you can use, right? So this is as what another something. I think it's scanning. It's a scanner. We have an exploit. Also, you have another exploit. There are almost 3 exploits and 2 scanners. So, how you scan a basic application like the one we have, you can use the numbers. You can see you have 0, 1, 2, 3, or you can use the actual whole what name. All right. So let's assume we want to use this. Okay, this is now the injection. I want to use the scanner. I want to scan if really this application is vulnerable to the uh, Log4Shell exploit. So I can choose to say use and then paste in the whole name, or I can choose to use and then the number of the same. So it's number 1. So I'm going to say use 1. And then you can see the log Metasploit's terminal has changed, right? It has changed to the exact tool that we've used, or the exact module that we've selected. So let's assume you don't know how to use it. You just say show options. See maybe the options that you can give it. And so this is quite big and it's kind of being defaced. Just going to make it a little bit smaller. So you can see some things that don't even make sense, like header files, and then it's saying required no, HTTP method required yes. So all these fields are pre-filled. You just look for the fields that have yes and are not filled. For example, we have our hosts, right? You can see it's saying yes, but we don't have anything in here. So our hosts basically means the target, right? So the target is this application, and we're just going to copy you can choose to copy the URL, or maybe it's IP address, right? So the IP address we saw was 127.0.0.1 of localhost. Just for what? For let me just get it back to 127, and then illustrate using that. So okay, I just do it my 127.0.0.1. So this is what we are going to use. Copy it and then come back and say we want to set this R host to that destination, this IP address. So how we set it, we just say set and then R host, paste that URL, the IP address. I mean, it actually excuse me. It's sneezing. So when you do that, you can see that the R host has been set to that. Then we check for other fields that need to be set. So we've already set that. Now, okay, because we haven't refreshed or we haven't rechecked it, it's still empty. So when we check for it again, like show options, we'll now see that it's populated with what we just entered. And then the remote port, it's not 80, it's 8080. So we're going to change that. And how we do that, we just say set our port to 8080. So anything else that we need, target URI, it's set, threads, they are set. Anything else required, but it's not set. I think everything is pretty much set. So how you run the exploit, or how you make it execute whatever you've done, you can use run or you can use exploit, right? So any of them can work. So when we do that, it will start scanning and it's saying that it has aborted due to a failure but config. Okay, so the server host option must be set to a routable IP address. So the server host is basically our current, let's say the attacker's machine. So you're just going to say set SRV host. You can choose to use either capital as it's saying or small. It doesn't really matter. So set server host into, well, I don't know our IP address. So I'm just going to pop another shell and then check for the IP address. How I do that, I use if config. Oh God, I misspelled it. If config. So this will give back a list of the interfaces in my PC and the IP addresses. This is my Wi-Fi card and it's what we're going to use. So I copy the IP address and then take it to the other terminal. So set SRV host, the server host to my IP address. And then now if I say run or exploit, it's going to start scanning. So it's scanning, it has found what? Oh shoot. Instead of using the scanner, use an exploit. All right, so it's going to make the actual exploit. It's saying it has found a log4 shell via this header user agent, right? And it's saying that the running OS is Linux, all that blah blah blah. It's a known architecture. It's doing all that stuff, and it has what? It has finished. Oh, so this was the scanner, not the exploit, right? So now we have an idea of what is vulnerable in the application. It's the user agent head. So this is what we can use to make the log4shell exploit, right? So that was just a demonstration of a scanner. So I'm just going to do it manually now without using Metasploit. So I'm going to close off that and then focus on this. I'm going to call in fish and make this fill the whole screen, right? I want you guys to see everything. And then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and split the screen into 4. So split the first time, split the second time, split the third time. And then in each and every one of them, I'm going to use fish. So fish and then make it a little bit bigger. Same with this one. Fish photo completion. Make it a little bit bigger, clear the screen. And the same thing with the final one. Fish screen, make it a little bit bigger. So in the first terminal, I'm going to use an LDAP server. All right. I'm not going to explain how the 4 shell exploit works because I have another video on the same. So I'll just attach it to this session. So when you have a look at that, you'll understand how 4 shell comes in, how it can be mitigated, and then this will be the actual exploit. All right. So I'm just going to look for a tool called what is the name? I think it's MarshallSec. Yeah, MarshallSec. So this is the actual tool, and it's what we're going to use to set up the LDAP server. So you can just read and see what it does, what it is. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to clone it. So copy that URL, and then where am I going to clone it? Maybe I can change the directory into downloads and make a directory called exploit, so or xpt, and then change the directory into xpt and git clone the URL. All right, so if you're seeing magic when I'm saying git clone and all that, you should watch another video that we had on web basics. All right, so it talks more on Git and GitHub and what they are and all that stuff. Now, when we list, we have a new folder called MarshallSec. We just cd into MarshallSec. How to use it? It's already in the README file. So if you scroll down to this README, you'll see the usage bit. Right. So to run this, you need to have Java 8. I'm not following that. And you need to have Maven. All right. So I already have Maven and Java installed. So I'm just going to copy these and then paste it inside here. Though this is going to build the actual package. So as it does the building, in the second terminal, I'm going to open a listener. All right. So when we exploit the application, it's going to connect back to this listener. How we do that? We use netcat. All right. So I'm just going to open listener. So you can see I have many things, LNVP and then 1990. So these are just arguments that you feed into netcat. Tell it to, the L means listen, the V means verbose, and then the P means on port. What does the N mean? Can't recall what it means, but I don't think it's really necessary. And then 1990. So when I do that, you'll see it's listening, right? Okay, so this has already finished building, and now I'm going to run it up to open an LDAP server. I'll explain what an LDAP server is later on. So in this other terminal, I'm going to create the actual exploit. It's a simple Java application that will enable us to, that will be run in the victim machine. So this application that we're going to build here will be passed to this LDAP server and then pushed to that Jetty server, and it's what it's what is going to give us a shell, right? So it's what is going to pop us a remote shell. We'll see that into action. I don't want to get us lost in words. So this is already built. We have a listener, and so we only have two things remaining. Now exploiting log4, the log4Shell, and we have a few parameters. We already know that the application has a vulnerable user agent field. We're still going to use curl. So let me just write the exploit down here. Curl, the trigger, I mean curl, and then we're going to give it a header, a user agent. Sorry, it's already completing for me. I think I had done this before. So the log4Shell application is exploited with a string that looks like this. All right, we have some JNDI stuff, LDAP, and then a malicious host, and the class that is going to be fetched. So I'm going to make this class. All right, it's what we are going to create up here. So how we do that, we are going to switch to the folder that we just created inside the downloads. Then maybe you can just create a new one just to avoid conflicts and stuff. So make a directory called maybe log4, and then change the directory into log. Oh, I missed this. Make the log4. So change the directory into log4. And now in here, we can use any editor. We can use VS Code. We can use Nano. We can use text. We can use Pluma. We can use anything. But I like using Vim. All right. So Vim is quite an interesting editor, and it's very hard at the beginning. So you have, if you want to know more about Vim, you can watch some YouTube tutorials on how to use Vim. Or maybe just Google on how to use Vim. So I'm going to create a file called log4, and then RCE dot, oh, it's log4j, log4j RCE dot Java, right? And then it opens the file. So a normal Java application starts with a class that looks exactly like the name of the file. So public, and then class, then log4 JRCE. Then you open the tag and close it. Maybe you can press enter. So normal Java application have a main or an entry point, which goes like, I think something like public, static, and then I think void, main, and string arguments, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to do all that, right? I'll explain that later on. I'm just going to have static, then open it and close it. And then inside, I can have something like system log. right? Or just printing something. So something like system dot out dot print ln um, an exploit. Then we close that and end with a semicolon as always. So when we compile this, it can't run on its own. It needs a main activity or a main class, right? It needs an entry point, so it can't run on it. It can't run on its own. It needs an entry point to show it how what to do and how to get called. But we'll see how we are going to use this bare minimal and make it run in the victims application that has the Jetty stuff. So we don't want to just exploit a system and then print to them I'm an exploit. No, 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 no. We want to exploit the system and then get a shell that we can use to remotely control the application and maybe get inside the network and do all sorts of nasty things. Steal some files, maybe hit them with ransomware and anything malicious. So how we do that? We can use an inbuilt method that can run system commands, right? So before I get into that inbuilt stuff, I'm just going to save this and then compile it. See, no, for let's see. Now, if we list, we'll see two files. We have the source code and the intermediate file, right? So this is Java stuff. Remember, Java is universal. Like you write it once and run it everywhere. Okay, so this is what we're going to call here, and it's what we're going to use for the exploit, right? All right. So far so good. Next, we go to what? We have the listener, we have the, okay, so let's set up the LDAP server as I explain what it is. So we're just going back and see how it's run. So the usage is Java CP and then all that blah, blah, blah. So let's just replicate that server. Then CP, oh, it's already finishing for me. That's quite awesome. So when we run that, we can see that it's listening on 1389. Now this is the LDAP server. So ideally what this does is when we call this using curl, it gets to this LDAP server immediately, all right? When it gets here, now the LDAP server redirects it to another um, another place where you have the exploit hosted, and the exploit is fetched, taken back to the LDAP server, and then taken to the application that is vulnerable, and finally gives us back a shell. So it's not something easy. It's uh, it's something with multiple steps that gives us the full control that we want. All right. So most of you might be floating at this time, at this point in time, but trust me, when you watch the previous video and then watch, get the basics from the concepts from this one, you'll join the dots and then you'll be able to reason out why I'm doing this and why this is happening. All right, so up here, I'm going to host to open a simple Python server. So how I do that, I use sudo and then Python 3 HTTP. We're opening it on port 8000 because that's what the LDAP is going to point to. The LDAP server is going to point to. So let me enter my password. All right, and then we have the server running. Okay, so now when we run this trigger, we're not going to see anything because whatever we have on the exploit is going to be printed in the server. So we don't want that. We don't want them to just see an exploit, or maybe you can just run it. So I'm going to change a few things. The IP address is wrong. I think it's correct actually, 4326. We just run if config. see my IP address, it's 4326. Oh yeah, so it's actually correct. So when we run it, if you're keen enough, you'll see how it's going to go from here, and then, well, ideally it's going to call something in the server, and then come to this other LDAP server, which is going to call in the exploit from here, take it back, and all that. If you're very keen, you'll see that it happened in a split second, but you can already see that it has sent the results of this, and it has redirected it to this, and then you can see that we have logged in something. It's a get request, so this class has been gotten and taken to the server, the vulnerable server. Now if we look at the vulnerable server, we'll be able to see that our exploit actually did run. Where did I place it? It's somewhere down here. Let's just pull it up and see what they see. All right, so you can see something. I'm an exploit. So the system admins will see this and be like, "Oh my God, somebody's trying to get to exploit us." All right, they're going to freak out because it's more of a warning message. Now that was just a sanity test. Let's get to the real thing, make the actual exploit that is going to give us back a shell. So I'm going to stop the Python server and maybe stop the LDAP server. So Control C, right, and then restart it again. Now let's continue making our exploit do more useful thing. So I'm just going to open it using Vim and then get into edit mode. Now inside here, I want to call in an inbuilt method that enables us to run system commands. So we want, when the exploit gets to the server, instead of just printing this, it's going to run an actual command that will give us back a shell. All right, so I'm going to use something called runtime. You can Google to see what it's about. You can Google something like Java runtime, maybe class. Right, then you see what it does, or maybe I think it's usually a method. Oh yeah, so you can see it's available, and then what it does, you can even see how it gets used, and then you can see that it provides method to execute a process. Okay, I think I was too fast on that. And well, essentially, you can just Google and see what it does and what it is, just to see more about it, right? But you're not going to do that. So I know it how to use it often, and it's what I'm going to do. So we call it like runtime, and then get runtime, get runtime using camel casing, runtime, and then brackets, and then exec. Now inside, it's why you give it something to execute. So essentially, when this runs on the server, you can do something like normal who am I. You can do something like popping a calculator. Maybe, I don't know, you can pop a bin, share a bash shell. You can do anything you want, but we want a connection back to the listening port over here. All right, so how we do that, we use a tool called ncat. All right, so most servers have a netcat installed by default. Right, netcat is this tool that we just used here, and others can have a more advanced version of netcat that is called ncat installed on the same, and it takes in parameters that can enable us to pop back a shell. So I'm not going to focus on netcat. We maybe have another session on netcat and what you can do with it some other time. So I'm going to give it an A, and then we want it to pop a bash. I think it's usually bin and then bash, and the IP address. So our IP address was this is the attacker's IP address. Bear that in mind. Where was it? Oh, this is it. So this is the attacker's IP address. We copy it, take it back here, Then finally give the port that is open. So we have port 9090 open. So essentially this command, if we were to run it manually or normally in another terminal, it's going to connect back to this. And actually you can just try it for the benefit of doubt. So we copy that, and then copy, and we'll use it down here. So I'm just going to paste it and then press enter. So you can see we have a connection received, right? And from here you can see anything. So if we try running a command like ls, we'll see the directories from this terminal. So you can see we have all these. If we try something like maybe who am I, we'll see the context that is being run by this netcat command. So let's close that and reopen it again. You'll notice that when I close these also closed too. So let's just release them again. And just to show, illustrate on maybe to put more emphasis, to show some form of difference, I'm going to stop the vulnerable server, and run it in a root context. Right, so I'm just going to Control C and then say add sudo. So sudo, then Java. I'm going to enter my password. So basically, this server is running in a root context. So if anyone exploits this server or this application, they are going to have root privileges. All right. So I said root privileges. It's like getting administrator rights on a Windows machine. So let's wind up on our exploit and add. Wait for. It's wait for. So that essentially should work. And I suppose I had, yeah, this essentially should work. But it's usually recommended to have try and catch blocks, so that if something goes wrong or if the server doesn't connect back, it does something. So if you've done Java, you will understand that, but you're not getting into that actually. So let me just save that and then compile it. Oh yeah, it's telling us to add the try. Okay, we're just going to do it. So right, I'm going to add a try catch block used for error handling. So try to run that, and if that fails, you should catch an exception and then maybe print that print. Just know that is an error handling or an error hatching stuff. Then let's now try to compile it. Oh, it's okay. What's up? It's saying that, oh, I never had any, like I missed any here, so that's why it's complaining. I'm going to add the E runtime, right? And then save it. So I hope we have no more errors. It has compiled gracefully. And then now we set back the Python server and now run the exploit. So ideally, if we run the exploit now, we should have a shell in this terminal. So let's do it. Let's do that. And you can see we have already served the stuff. It has gone back and we already have a connection back. So now if we say, who am I? We'll see the application is running in a root context. So essentially now we have fully compromised that Java application. We can do anything we want. We can list the files. We can copy anything using SCP. We can delete the whole system. We can encrypt everything. We can do anything we want with that application because we have all the permissions that we need to do anything. We can even change the people inside the application password and do all the sorts of things. So all sorts of things. So that's basically how the log4 shell application, log4 shell vulnerable application can be exploited. So that's the manual way, and you've seen how tedious it is, the multiple steps involved, and all that. But Metasploit makes it way simple, right? So I'm just going to stop all these and use the Metasploit version of the exploit. I'm going to even close it off. So we use the Metasploit scanner. Now we're going to use a Metasploit to do the actual exploit. So I'm going to say, right, I'm going to say search for log 4, right? And then now we're going to use the first, which is the actual exploit. And to do that, we use, then 0. Okay, and then show options. So we can see the things that it takes. It takes in our host. So let's set that first. Set our host. We remember the destination host of 127.0.0.1. Then the R port, set R port to 8080. What else? Now it's asking for the L host. The L host is our IP address. So our IP address was on, I think I still have it somewhere here. Oh yeah, we still need to set the SRV host and then the L host. Now once we have all those, we can just run exploit. And saying it has started the TCP handler. It did scan, it found log4Shell where that header, and now it's sleeping for 30 seconds and waiting for a connection back. So when it's done, it's going to tell us if it's successful or something went wrong and all that. Let's just give it some time. Oh, it failed. It failed. Their address is already in use. Sorry, so I'm just going to restart the server and run it again. So let's try running our exploit again and see if it's going to do it. All right, so it's doing its magic, waiting and all that. So now this is where the hackers have fingers crossed, their hearts are thumping, they're waiting for a shell to pop so that they can do their stuff. You know, it's all exciting and stuff. And then it fails, they are frustrated, they redo it again. Okay, so it's telling us that the address is, I thought I stopped the Python server. So I'm just going to change the, what am I going to change? We just show options. And change that port that is in use. So the HTTP SRP port is what is being used. You remember that our server is running on 8080, and then we have this other one, it's running on 8080. So they kind of are having a conflict. So let's change that. Change that into maybe 2020. Yeah, 2020. Hope that works. And then now we run the exploits. Right, do your magic. It's still running. Oh yeah, we're almost there. It's serving the Java code, and we have a shell. We have a command shell. Now we can do the usual things like check the context of the application. Who am I? Wait for it to give us back something. Come on, it's taking a lot of time. Tell us who you are. Who are you? Show us your true colors. Come on, give us back something. And it's telling us it's the root, right? So we have all the privileges. We can even check for the IDs. You can see we are fully root, like we can do anything we want. And that's how you exploit the Log4Shell vulnerability. All right, you can go Google more about it and see how or why it happens, how to mitigate it. I think I had a session on the mitigation and stuff. I'm going to share it with this session, and that's it, guys. Thank you for listening in. I hope you've learned a lot, and I hope you understood most of the stuff. You've. I just wanted you to see the ideology behind, not the actual or the actual methodology. It's just how it's done, just to get a gist of how to do it. All right. So thank you for tuning in and have a nice time. I'm going to stop the recording and the presentation.